Welcome to 1202, the Human Factors Podcast. The podcast that covers all things about humans, technology, and particularly the bit in between.
And welcome to this episode of 1202, the Human Factors Podcast, with me, your host, Barry Kirby. Before I introduce today's guests, I wanted to highlight a couple of podcast updates. I'm really pleased to say that we hit the 10,000 audio download mark the other day. And hopefully, if you've been following our social feeds, you'll have seen this landmark event. Now, I've mentioned before when we did some of the catch-ups last year and start of this year, this is not a target-driven venture. This is something I do for fun and fun and frolics. But I did have a bit of a benchmark at the back of my mind of around 10,000 downloads in about 5 years, given the size of the Human Factors audience and things like that, would be about right. And this is only the start of year 4, and we've hit that 10,000 mark. And that doesn't even include any of the newer YouTube stuff. But what is a even better statistic, I think, and that I'm really proud of, is that the number of this thing of idea of impactful plays, i.e. those people who are listening and engaging with at least over 75% of every episode. And we're getting that at around 90%, which I think is phenomenal. And apparently to all podcast statistics, apparently that's a really good thing as well. So I'd like to say thank you for all your support and have a go. Let me know what target we should be aiming for next. I mean, could we make 20,000 downloads in the next 12 months? Possibly ambitious, but let's see what, for those of you who like statistics, what should we go for next? And secondly, as regular listeners will know, I've also been helping out on Human Factors Cast, the US-based weekly Human Factors news roundup and discussion with Nick Rome. I've been filling in for Blake, who's, for a number of reasons, has been taking some time out. But hopefully, he's going to be returning to claim his rightful throne in the very near future. But I'm delighted to say that I'm also going to be staying on, and it'll be the 3 of us hosting it. And additionally, we're going to be creating a bit of an informal partnership, a gathering, a grouping, if you will, and cross-referencing content between this podcast and Human Factors Cast, and really to create more of an alliance, a more sharing of best practice human factors knowledge across our community. It's going to be that significant new step in the UK-US relationship. Anyway, on to today's episode. Musculoskeletal disorders is not only a difficult word to say, but it is also a leading cause of occupational ill health in the UK. And this accounts for around 30% of all work-related ill health cases and 27% of lost working days. It's 14.9 or nearly 50 million people it affects nationally, and it costs the NHS over £5 billion a year for treatment and support. And many human factors practitioners will be painfully aware of just how difficult a problem this is. And that's why when I heard that Arco have partnered with FLX Health to bring the FLX app to the UK, which not only looks to accelerate the recovery process of musculoskeletal disorders, but also to help prevent injury in the first place, which is something that's quite close to my heart. So I'm really pleased that, because we haven't covered this idea of musculoskeletal health on the podcast yet, I'm delighted to be joined by Rob Lewis, who is CEO of FLX Health, and John Mckindland from Arco to tell us more about MSD, their intervention, the FLX app. And as I'm just playing with the buttons, gents, welcome, and thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks, Barry.
So, as is the usual sort of structure for the website, for the podcast, I'm going to chat with you a bit individually about who you are, where you come from, and your interest in it. So, Rob, can I come to you first? What is it? You're the CEO of FLX Health. What is FLX Health, and what are you doing on a day-to-day basis?
As you mentioned, Barry, we developed a product called FLX Health. My background is actually in developing pharmaceuticals, so spent 30 years in the pharmaceutical industry. Part of that was with digital health, and we set up a digital health company in 2016. And FLX Health is one of the projects that we developed from that, and it's the product we're most proud of. So that's really my background. My day-to-day job really is, we've just really built that product. We've just launched it with our partnership with Arco. We're going to discuss in this podcast, and really our job now is to make it as big as we can and help as many people as we possibly can.
Awesome, that's fantastic. John, if I can come to you, you're here on behalf of Arco.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about what you do and what your day-to-day role is?
Yeah, so I'm the technical sales manager for the FLX app. So pretty much my role is to help us Arco productize it with FLX Health, bring it to market, and make sure really we're sitting in front of our customers and be able to explain the benefits to the employer and the employee the app, and how, of course, as you quite rightly said, it rehab or certainly give some pain relief to the users. My background actually is telecommunications, so I've spent most of my life in that particular arena, which is hence the ability to come and bring the app to marketplace. But also from a biomechanics point of view, it's kind of a part-time hobby. So actually, I'm quite lucky. I get to manage an app, which I kind of understand, but I'm kind of working in a role that's it's my hobby as well. So yeah.
When you say it's your hobby, how do you mean it's your hobby?
I'm a frustrated runner, and have been for many
Right.
years. And I carry an awful lot of sports injuries. And about 5-6 years ago, I decided I wanted to discover a little bit more about biomechanics and how that was affecting me. Because I've had some significant injuries with my legs, and really try and get some running form out of it. So I kind of really got engaged with the whole subject matter through that. And of course, these opportunities come along as well, actually. And not many people get a chance to go to work and actually extol the virtues of their hobby as well as the technology side. So very lucky fella.
Brilliant. That works really well. Also, you brought this to fruition through. We've had, I don't know if you noticed, but 2 years of pandemic, which has been, we've had to change the way that we look at how we work, how we engage, and all that sort of stuff. So, how have you guys found developing this sort of thing, and just generally working through the pandemic itself? Rob, how have you found it?
Well, in some ways, it's the pandemic's been beneficial in terms of developers, because part of my business as well is doing consultancy and actually earning money through that, which actually completely evaporated during the pandemic. So personally, it's been very difficult from a business, but that lack of other things to do has helped us focus on Flex. It's also held us back with Flex as well, in the sense of it's very difficult to get people to make decisions during a pandemic. So you can't go and see them. Secondly, they're worried about budget. And thirdly, sort of innovation in any other space apart from how do we continue to operate during a pandemic has kind of like sort of reduced people's decision-making ability, which is really what you need when you're trying to get something to market. So yeah, we found the last 2 years really, really difficult from a business point of view, from a personal point of view. It's been pretty tough as well.
Yeah, I've talked to quite a lot of people yes, it's been great to have the opportunity to deliver almost a pet project to a certain extent, but it doesn't get away from the stark reality of what a lot of people of just generally living that day to day with not knowing what's going on. John, from your perspective, how have you found working during the pandemic?
Yeah, from a personal level, it was quite strange to go from someone who spends an awful lot of time in the car traveling around the country, visiting customers, to actually trying to perform that role virtually from home. Productivity levels certainly gone through the roof. I found myself working a lot longer hours. Didn't really suffer with any mental health issues or concerns around that, but I became very much significantly more a sedentary worker than I was previously. And that caused some issues, So I certainly knew where the fridge was, put it that way. So, but from a professional level, it was a boom time. You think about what Arco do as PPE providers in the marketplace. Obviously, it's just a huge logistical operation, and it kicked into overdrive through the pandemic. So from a business perspective, actually, there was very little impact around that apart from the increased workload.
Yeah, I've got to say the way that different people adapted to being sedentary was quite interesting. I had a number of friends who would commute to work by going to have the walk around the block and then come back home and things like that. And it's there's been a number of ingenious ways that people have actually adapted and working forward. What we'll do, we're just going to take a very quick break, and then we'll come back to, because I'm really keen to hear more about Flex and what we can do. So we'll be back right after this.
You are listening to 1202, the Human Factors Podcast. We wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you for your support. You can help further by rating us through your podcast provider, sharing us through social media, and telling your friends and colleagues. Let's work together in raising awareness of the value in putting users at the center of what we do.
Welcome back, and I'm here with Rob Lewis, the CEO of FLX Health, and John Mckindland from Arco, and we're here to talk about the Flex app. So before we get stuck into that, Rob, can you just give us a bit of an insight, a layman's description, if you will, around musculoskeletal disorder, if you can actually say it, which I'm clearly struggling to do. Yeah, could you give us a bit of an overview about what it is and why it is something that we need to address?
Barry. Musculoskeletal disease is really anything that goes wrong with your osseous, neural, or myofascial system. So in other words, your bone, muscles, and your nerves. And everybody on this call, and probably everybody will have experienced musculoskeletal disease. So it's that nagging back pain you get from time to time. Main could be you've got sore knees. John mentioned running. You know, classically, you might be really fit and healthy because you do a lot of running, but you may have sore knees because you've worn away the car. So anything that affects that system is what we call musculoskeletal disease, and it can be on one end very low niggly pain, so quite extreme pain, or it could progress to osteoarthritis or something quite serious, and you know you can end up having your knees replaced, etc., etc. And fundamentally, one of the most prevalent diseases that affects the global health system. The World Health Organization uses a measure called a year lost to disability. Of the top 10 causes of years lost to disability, musculoskeletal disease is 3 of the top 10 causes, and combined we lose 100 of disability because of it. And a year lost to disability is defined as a year of your life that is negatively impacted by disease. So it's a massively prevalent thing. As I said, pretty much everyone's experienced it, and it's something that as we get older, we tend to, as we wear out or have suffered more injury, and we tend to be more and more prone to it.
When you put some stark figures like that together, it just shows you just what the what the appetite is there, or what the potential is there for doing some good. If everybody suffers from it one way or another, and actually just as you describe it, yes, my knees, my shoulder, my lower back as well, is this something that is just inevitable, or is it something that actually with good management and actually decent awareness that we can actually do something proactively about?
Well, it's kind of inevitable. It's a consequence of aging. So, you know, a biological clock, we live way longer than we ever lived, or than we're designed to live. You know, we live in a very comfortable world where we're protected from disease, and you know, generally we're not saber-toothed tigers anymore. So, you know, our bodies are longer than they were really designed to do. So it is kind of inevitable. Obviously, you may be unlucky injury. So, you know, you might be a 16-year-old kid and have a football injury that causes an injury that's going to result in osteoarthritis of the knee, and that's kind of unlucky. But we wear and tear. So it's really important that we kind of look after ourselves. So that could be our diet. So obviously, the less we eat, the less we wear, force we put on our bodies, so that reduces the impact of musculoskeletal disease. Arguably, some diets have more natural anti-inflammatories and that kind of thing. So the lifestyle factors, but fundamentally, we need to stay in shape to look after our musculoskeletal health, because if we are cropped and we have lots of musculoskeletal, it means we can't go for a run, we can't go for a walk, we can't play sport, and that inhibits our health in a more wider on a more wider basis, because it risks of cardiovascular disease, metabolic disease, mental health problems, etc. So we see at FLX Health, we see good musculoskeletal health as an innate physical activity, and physical activity is the cornerstone of good health. I think that answers your question. I went off on one a bit there, but hey.
No, that's perfect, because I think one of the things behind this is, like, as you quite rightly point out, that if you got that core element of your skeletal health right, then it's an enabler. It allows you to go and do other things, you're running and things like that. So with that in mind, then, can you tell us a bit more about the Flex app and actually how that app is going to help us combat this disorder and
Sure.
and what it is we can do going forward?
Yeah, well, it's worth just telling you a little bit about the story of how we came to develop it. So, as I mentioned earlier, my background was in the pharma industry. So, generally speaking, the pharma makes money out of people being ill, because we can then give people the medicines that fix it. There's nothing wrong with that, of course. But the kind of standard in healthcare is prevalence in the first place, which is kind of where we're trying to get to with Flex. So we see Flex as a preventer of musculoskeletal disease. Andrew, who's my business partner in Flex, and I met Martin, who's the other person in Flex Health, the company. And Martin is a physiotherapist and a biomechanics coach who's a genuine world leader in the science of biomechanics. When we met him, we were really impressed with his expertise, and basically he's developed some treatment algorithms which allow him to understand how humans move and why they move in the way that they do. And that learning has resulted in a series of treatment algorithms, as I mentioned, and effectively with Flex, we've did those treatment algorithms. So I would think Flex is effectively an appointment with Martin. So rather than going to see Martin, he's based in Newark, if you want to go and see him, get his expertise through our app. And we've effectively digitized that, as I say. And it does two things fundamentally. So we can help people manage pain. So it can, if you've got knee pain, back pain, shoulder pain, whatever, we can give you physiotherapy programs to address that pain. Have what we call a biomechanics program, and that biomechanics program is highly innovative, and it's based on algorithms that were developed in 4,000 people, and that algorithm gives insight that allows us to identify where an individual has biomechanical dysfunction, and then give them a program of exercises to address that biomechanical dysfunction to reduce the chance of musculoskeletal disease. So it's a highly preventative product, and as I said, it uses our proprietary algorithms that hopefully mean that we can solve musculoskeletal disease by reducing its chance of occurring in an individual.
That's really, yeah. I mean, that sounds like it's going to be like the next app that everybody should have to be able to run themselves forward with it. But how does an app actually do that? So if I was to log into the app, and what does it do on a day-to-day basis? How would I interact with it?
Sure, I kind of glossed over that bit of detail, didn't I? Sorry. So the first thing that it does, the biomechanics, the preventative program, it takes you through some screening tests. And by screening tests, I mean, it asks you to do some exercises. So the app, a video, and it will explain what to do with this screening test, which is an exercise. And then you enter into the app how you performed in that test. That screening is identifying the parts of your body that have biomechanical dysfunctions. And then what the app does is it gives you exercises to work on those biomechanical dysfunctions. So on day one, you screen yourself. The app identifies your biomechanical profile and gives you a program of exercises designed to address those dysfunctions. And do that for a week. So each day you do a small number of physiotherapy exercises, and then after 1 week you rescreen yourself. And that rescreening is figuring out what exercises are working for you or whether they're not. And basically the app tweaks the program depending on your progress and how the exercises are working. And basically the program's 12 weeks. So you do the exercises for 12 weeks, and that addresses your biomechanical dysfunction. It continually tunes the program as you go through to account for your progress, and in that way personalizes the intervention for you. And we've proven that can reduce the incidence of musculoskeletal disease. The pain program aspect of the app is slightly different. So in that case, you're actually in pain. So you've got knee pain, back pain, ankle pain, whatever it may be. In that case, it basically does a triage with you. So first it triages you to check that you're suitable for physiotherapy exercise intervention. It also checks to make sure that pain's not due to line or something you might have to worry about. And if you pass the screening, it gives you a series of exercises, and there are 6 grades of exercise. And so once you've reached level, you can move to the second level. And as I said, there are 6 grades, and it can take up to 6 weeks to progress through the 6 grades. And we've shown that can help people manage pain.
So I guess from what you're saying, then the unique. So it's not just telling you go in, do this pre-canned exercise program. It's actually, from what you're saying, it adapts to you and your problems or your progress as you go along, and therefore it goes completely individual. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. If you went for a course of physiotherapy, you'd go and see a therapist on day 1, and then you would return routinely, and then he would be checking your progress. And our app does that in a obviously algorithmically, which means scale it more economically, and we can basically treat more people with less resource, which is good.
Cool. Okay. So look at this from the other side, then, from the market forces. John, if I could sort of bring you into, what is the market need for this app, and why should workforces actually be concerned about this? Or if it's such a big, it's going to happen, it's a problem, why should we be concerned about it?
Well, certainly from an employer perspective, you've got a disengaged workforce, which is impacting on productivity if they're carrying an injury into work or being called, or their work is actually causing an injury. And to give you an example of that, HSE will tell you that about 59% of all people with an MSD, a multiple skeletal disorder, are currently in work. So people are taking these injuries into work, which is impacting an employer's productivity, and of course, you're not being able to maximise performance. You've also got to think about the mental well-being of and the morale of your workforce as well. So I think we can all probably get our head around the fact that if you're off long term with a particular injury, that it's going to impact your mental health. It's going to cause some depression, maybe some anxiety over your suitability to do your role, and perhaps even impact on some career goals. There's also financial impact, both the employer and the employee. So from the employer perspective, it's obviously that the cost of replacing that employee or cost of treatment, and for the employee, of course, they can find themselves on SSP, which is has got an impact on their personal financial well-being. So again, taking all that into account from an employer's perspective, there's a huge advantage to be able to get your workforce to the point where they're a little bit more flexible. Maybe they've got a bit more mobility. But I think more importantly, by exploring the virtues of what this app can do, you're allowing people to take, to be empowered really to take personal responsibility for their well-being and perhaps put themselves in a position where they're actually physically better able to perform their role without injury. So it's a huge benefits to the employer and to the employee, and certainly from the lost productivity in the marketplace, which is estimated to be around about £4 billion just around multiple skeletal disorders, and of course then you've got the impact on the employee and their finances as well.
So, and I don't want to pose an awkward question, but I will. It sounds great. It sounds like it's something to be really useful, and I can sort of see just from my knees are telling me that yes, there's going to be something useful around this. But have you actually unleashed this on the market yet? Have you got any sort of case studies, any sort of examples of where you have used this and it's provided benefit? So, John, have you got any sort of evidence around that?
Yeah, certainly. Well, so we've there's a study with and a case with South Yorkshire Police, which actually, Rob, you're probably better sort of geared up to explain the results of the South Yorkshire Police.
Yeah. So when Martin developed the clinical algorithms, we tested them in the South Yorkshire Police Force. So Martin with the South Yorkshire Police Force. Policemen apparently suffer from lots of skeletal problems because they sit around behind the desk writing reports all day. They're in patrol cars or they're walking the beat. They get injured in their line of work. And we did a study among 237 of their workers. And what we did was put the app into place for 3 months, as I said, among 237 of their workers. And what we were able to show as a result of 3 months of using the app is they saw a corresponding reduction in musculoskeletal. And we were able to reduce the incidence of musculoskeletal disease by 64%. So that's a really impressive figure. So that's a sizable reduction in musculoskeletal disease, which meant that obviously the police officers had better health and a higher quality of life, but also importantly, the police force had a big save in terms of productivity and fewer people absent from work because of musculoskeletal disease.
That's a really impressive outcome, and it's really nice to see basic practical application there. Is there any other examples that you've got that you can share?
We've actually done 5 studies on the product. So we did the study in the South Yorkshire Police that I've just described. We did a confirmatory study in the Dorset fire, and in that particular study, we showed a 2% reduction in absenteeism due to back pain, which was their primary concern. We've also done 2 studies in the PING. So in one study, we did a study in the NHS and in one of the trusts in Great Yarmouth and Waveney, I think it was. And we looked at a group of people and we characterized them to what level of pain they were suffering from. So they were characterized as having no pain, mild pain, or severe pain. And we put the products into place for 6 weeks. And we were able to show significant reductions in the number of people suffering from severe pain and moderate pain, and we moved down into the lower pain groups. In other words, people who had no or mild pain. So we were able to show that we reduced pain as well. We did a similar in an exercise setting in a health club, and we showed things like reductions in knee pain of 75% and a variety of other pains. Also, in the first lockdown during coronavirus, as I said, Martin's a physiotherapist. He was actually unable to practice because there was no face-to-face physio, and he was using Flex to triage patients over the telephone, and he was able to show that something like something%, I can't remember exactly what the percentage was, but he was able to deal with something like 80% of his patients using Flex, and they didn't require face-to-face physiotherapy. So in total, we've done a number of studies. I think we've had something like 4,700 people through the app contact data set. So a fairly robust sort of body of evidence, if you like.
I think there's some significant financial savings as well for the NHS. I mean, certainly when we looked at the figures of what they were spending on the part of the pain management with the treatment of those patients, we were able to estimate that we're saving about £16 for every £1 spent. So it's a huge reduction in the cost of the NHS just by going through, some of the processes that the app puts forward.
And that, yeah, I mean, that's quite substantial. I mean, what I really like about this is the fact that I love a good trial. I love seeing the hard data come in, and it's got to be quite heartwarming in many ways that you can have an app, because especially when doing preventative work, it's sometimes hard to quantify that, but the ability to be able to do that is quite phenomenal. I will go on a slight tangent now, because to finish off the interview, I do have a standard set of 3 questions that I like to ask. They feel a bit random. That's because they slightly are. So bear with it. But it's Rob, if I come to you first, what is your go-to book or paper or a reference? So it could be technical, it could be fiction, that you keep going back to, that you read again and again and again.
Okay, thanks, Barry. I don't tend to again and again because I've got a massive stack of books that I haven't made my way through yet already. But I've read some books that I've really enjoyed, and I'll give you 2 recommendations. So first one is Cormac McCarthy, the American author. He wrote a book called The Road. It's actually been turned into a film, but it's a really interesting post-apocalyptic tale about a guy surviving in America after an apocalypse. It's a really affecting and haunting book. If you fancy something a little bit more light-hearted, there's a British author called John Niven has written some really funny books, and the kind of book that you'd be reading on a train and feeling really stupid because you guffaw thing all the way through. I thoroughly recommend it.
Perfect. John, what about yourself?
Yes, 2 really. I think the one I find myself going back to sort of again and again at the moment is actually a book called The Lost Art of Running by Shane Benzie. So Shane's done some analysis around sort of the biomechanics of the body and the myofascial system and how you get elasticity out of your muscles when you're running, etc. And I've learned an awful lot about structure and form and the biomechanics for myself personally from that. I think in terms of one that's kind of motivated me, shall we say, is actually an ultra runner called Damon Hall, who released a book last year about his adventure for being effectively a journalist and in his late 30s getting into ultra running and being one of the world's now best ultra runners. He's approaching 40 or so. So that's an interesting read, because it talks about the psychology of it all as well.
Well, I think all of them need to be on my on my read list. If you were able to go back and give you some advice, one bit of advice to your younger self, Rob, what would you tell your younger self to do?
I'm now 52, so we'll be going back quite a long way. But I've also got teenage kids, so they might listen to this. I'll be slightly careful about what I say, but fundamentally, I personally think when you're younger, figure out what you enjoy doing, because you're going to be happy doing that in the future, and try and do something worthwhile. I'm really into music personally. I ended up being a scientist because I was good at science at school, but probably wish I'd done something in music, for example. So try and be true to yourself. Yeah.
Cool. And John, what would be your bit of advice to the younger John?
Well, certainly, I think listen to mum and dad. If mum and dad says that's probably going to hurt if you're going to do that, it probably will. But I think the best advice I would give to my younger self is actually your gut feeling's never been wrong. So if your gut says it's right, do it.
Oh, that's such a decent bit of advice. And then finally, Rob, if you wanted to stumble on this podcast again, who do you suggest we interview next to hold your attention?
Well, probably I could suggest loads of people I'd like to meet, but I'll resist that temptation. The person I love listening to at the moment is a guy called George Monbiot. So George Monbiot, if you don't know, is a columnist in The Guardian, an environmentalist, and like literally everything I've ever heard him say, I've agreed with wholeheartedly. He's got some really interesting views on the environment, what we should be doing, and kind of the whole thing about capitalism and can we have a sustainable future while capitalism is what drives us, and like GDP is not really a good measure of everyone's well-being. I really agree with everything I've ever heard him say. So he's kind of my hero at the moment. I would definitely recommend listening to him.
Awesome. And John, do you have any recommendations on who I should try and snag for an interview?
Well, definitely at some point you should definitely try and get Martin Haynes on, and you know, who's obviously written the algorithms for this, because it's an extremely impressive CV that the man has, and it's an extremely engaging person to speak to. But I would definitely push and try and get Damon Hall on as well as an ultra runner, because this is a guy that's come from a journalistic background. He's had to learn about the application of what his body can do, and how he would get that to the point where he's able to go extreme distances and under extreme pressure, and how to rehabilitate from injury, and how his body works mentally and physically. He's an extremely engaging guy to discuss. And again, from an environmental perspective, he's again a key voice in that particular world.
Awesome. Thank you both ever so much for your time today. Not only to talk us through the Flex app, but actually how you got there, how you've done it, and how you've tested it. I know from the more sciencey buffs in the human factors world, you know, that whole understanding that how you've trialed it and how you've engaged with it is a really key thing. So all of your contacts are going to be available in the show notes. And if you go to the 1202 website, 1202.com, 1202podcast.com, should get my own website right. All of your details will be there. But if they want to go and look about the Flex app itself, where can we go and find about the app itself and maybe sign up and engage with it?
Well, certainly on the arco.co.uk website, if you just input FLX into the search bar, it will take you to a full suite of pages about multiple skeletal disorders, a little bit about the app, and of course there's a contact page as well, but obviously through LinkedIn as well, through myself. So we're more than happy to engage with everybody through that media.
Awesome, and we shall make sure we have them links in the show notes as well. Yeah. So thank you both very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Just a reminder to everybody that the ergonomics conference is coming on in April. It's split into two sessions. There's going to be a virtual session on the 11th and 12th of April where we're covering topics on sustainability, automation, defense, and a physical meeting on the 25th and 26th of April in Birmingham, where we're looking at aviation, well-being, healthcare, tools, and non-technical skills, and a few more, but there was just too many to list. I'm going to be presenting in the sustainability section. And we're also going to take the podcast on tour to the physical event itself and try and ambush people in the bar and see what their thoughts truly are after a few drinks. So hopefully see you there. All that remains for me to say is to thank you both to Rob and to John for being awesome guests today, and hopefully see you all on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to 1202, the Human Factors Podcast. Please do get in touch with your thoughts, questions, and comments. You can contact us on social media such as Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook at 1202 Podcast. See you next time. And remember, it's more than just common sense.